Welcome to Inside Design with Kandrak and Cole, hosted by two nationally published Atlanta interior designers, Joanne Kandrak and Kelly Cole. These energetic women are also world travelers, charity givers, and bloggers with a wealth of information to share and stories to tell about the interior design world. Okay, now just a warning, this is going to be fun and not too serious. After all, they still do have an interior design business running at full speed.
Hey there, welcome to Inside Design with Kandrak and Cole. We're recording episode 125 today, and we have a guest, photographer Lannie Hall from Eikones Studio. Kelly and I love finding new products when we go to High Point Market, and so we were thrilled when we were walking along in the temporary area of Market and saw some beautiful black and white photography. So Lannie's company name is Eikones Studio, which is the Latin word for images. He sells loose and framed prints to interior designers in the U.S. and Europe. His work is so beautiful, but he also has a really great story to tell.
So before we jump into that with Lannie, we want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by our go-to brand of paint, Sherwin-Williams. So if you're thinking about getting your interior painted, like so many of our clients, we want to bring your attention to the Emerald Designer Edition paint by Sherwin-Williams. This particular edition of paint has a luxurious, smooth, and uniform finish. Comes in 200 colors, and this paint is actually a paint and primer in one. So this line has a new collection of brighter, cleaner whites that we refer to all the time. And as our good friend Sue Wadden says, who's been on our show 3 times or 4 times now, I can't even keep track. She's the director of color marketing for Sherwin-Williams. And she says, achieve a show-stopping transformation with these brighter whites, just right blues and greens, complex grays and beiges, and more muted tones of classic hues.
So for more information, visit sherwinwilliams.com or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Well, welcome, Lannie. Thank you so much for agreeing to be our guest. We understand this is your first podcast.
It is. It is. Thank you so much for inviting me to be with you guys this morning.
Of course. So let's go ahead. Let's start with your background because I think it's very interesting in how you got your start.
Sure. So a lot of people don't know this, but I'm actually a classically trained photographer. I actually was trained on chemicals and film when I was in college. And, most people today, photographers today, learned on, a digital camera. But I wanted to do a project similar to what I'm doing with Eikones Studio when I was graduating college. And, coming out of school, I just didn't have the business experience to be able to take my skill set at the time to the next level. And of course, at that age, I didn't have the money to do it either. So I went on to the corporate world, and I recently retired 3 years ago from a corporate sales management career after 35 years and started Eikones Studio. And so here we are 35 years later, finally, doing what I really wanted to do when I graduated college.
Well, we love that about you because Joanne and I did the exact same thing. This is career number 2 for us. And I'm sure we will all agree that what we learned in the corporate world was an incredible foundation for us to be entrepreneurs, but we would never go back to the corporate world now that we've had a taste of this life. And so we appreciate that you did that, although it took you 35 years. Goodness.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Hey, I'm a late bloomer.
True. And I also really appreciate that you are classically trained. It's funny that because the photographers that shoot our interiors are likewise classically trained. And I love to see them behind the camera because the way they shoot digitally still has a lot of all that they learned when they were developing film and on the old cameras still comes to light with their work. And I think you're a better photographer for it.
I believe so too, because not to discredit photographers that didn't learn, from the classically trained processes. But when you come from that background, you have a different appreciation for the art. And I think it shows, in the work. And the maturity level too probably has a little bit to do with it as well.
Where did you go to school, Lannie?
I went to the University of Oklahoma.
Okay. Is that where you're from?
Yeah. I actually grew up in Oklahoma, and I graduated from OU, and my degree is actually in advertising and marketing, hence my 35-year sales and marketing career. But, I was one of the few people that actually was able to, get to work in their field of study, because a lot of people go to college and don't ever do that.
Well, yeah, it's like, right. But, you got the creative and then you have the business too, which is, it's great to have that because there's a lot of artists whose brain can't go that way. So I'm sure this has helped you market your business.
I've been able to take the business from 0 to 60 in a much faster time period because of that background and that experience. So for that, it may have taken me 35 years to get to this point, but it was a well-served 35 years because a lot of artists don't have this skill set under their belt and can do some of the things that people like yourselves and myself have been able to do with a business if you have a business foundation background.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, 3 years in and you're already showing at High Point in the Atlanta shows, and that's very impressive. How do you know what to photograph, or how did you kind of decide what your topics or your subjects would be?
Well, a lot of it is just creative intuition, of course. I predominantly just shoot landscapes and architecture, but, I try to find areas that, will have interest to the viewer, but at the same time, We'll take this for an example, is that I just recently got back from Joshua Tree where I shot, which is beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And, then I can be in New York City and shooting there, which I did that. I go to New York with some regularity just simply because my sister lives there. And, it's great to go and see her, but I get to shoot while I'm there too. But,
yeah,
it's just about looking at the subject matter and trying to find a different angle that would be interesting to the viewer. And one of my main objectives is that I don't want the viewer to recognize the building I'm shooting. Because then it looks like a vacation shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I like to take an element of a building and shoot the different elements so people look at that and say, wow, that's really beautiful. Where is that?
That's and cool.
A prime example is I have a shot of the Guggenheim, and it's actually the parking garage. But it's very abstract. The lines of that building are very abstract anyway, but that's just a prime example of my approach to shooting. But it's just all about the intuition of what I think is next. It's, what an artist does. They say, I'm going to paint a tree today, and tomorrow I'm going to paint the moon. So
it's I think photographers are kind of like designers in that sense.
Oh,
where
yeah.
Our eyes are always open. Kelly and I just got back from a beautiful resort in Cancun, Mexico, and the architecture was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And every time you turned around, it's like, I got to get a picture of that. I've got to get a picture of that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think your eyes are always open.
So you obviously travel a lot. Is there a place that's your favorite to shoot?
Gosh, I have so many, but I think maybe my all-time favorite domestic has been Maine.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah, that's gorgeous.
If anybody's ever been to Maine, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just phenomenal. The terrain is beautiful, but the people are really beautiful too. And I'm not necessarily talking physically beautiful. It's just the way the people lead their lives there is in my opinion, is beautiful. They're just salt of the earth type people, very laid back, and just such a joy to be there. Massachusetts is probably my next favorite, for similar type reasons.
And what about internationally?
Oh, no doubt about it. Italy and Spain.
We knew you were going to say. We knew you were going to say Italy.
I just mouthed Italy to Joanne, just knowing that that's what you were going to say.
Yeah,
because we agree.
Yeah, just, I mean, you have so many fabulous subjects there. And I mean, you can go back over and over and over again and find something different, when you go there. And I've shot Scandinavia as well. And I think that's the people there are very beautiful. The lifestyles there are very beautiful. Subject matters are nice too, but no doubt Spain and Italy are the best.
Yeah. So do you have like a routine when you're setting up a photo shoot?
I do. So when I decide to go to a particular location, I do a little research, back home before I head out. But I don't have a precise agenda. I wait until I get to that location. And the reason for doing that is that when you do Google searches for, what are cool places to go see, photograph, or whatever your search criteria is, when you do that, where you're located, where your home base is, you get different results than if you do the same thing when you show up to Maine. And when you're in Maine and you do that same Google search, it's now giving you a different set of answers because you're now in the local setting of that area. So I typically go there without a huge agenda, and that's kind of my routine of deciding. And even then, I just kind of wait, if you will. I let the spirit tell me what I need to photograph when I get there, because you can see things totally different when you're there in person versus what you're seeing on the internet. So I'm kind of nilly-willy, if you will, in that.
Well, I think that organic approach is very much reflected in your work, and I think that's really what drew us to you. Yeah, immediately. So let's talk a little bit about your product. When we saw you in High Point, I was struck by the paper that you use and just how the images laid on that paper. They were just so,
it was different.
The quality was incredible. And so talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, thank you for that compliment. I'll say that up front. So I print everything on museum grade paper. And I do that for a couple of reasons, is that, like you said, when you see that paper and you touch it, you feel it, you pick it up, there is a remarkable difference in that paper than what you see in most, other showrooms that, you go into, that if they do sell loose prints, it's usually not of the same quality of paper. And I do that because the way that the ink is accepted on the paper, on a museum paper, is part of the special sauce, if you will. That's why those images look, the way that they look is because of the quality of the paper. It just
we noticed that right away.
Noticed it right away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in my opinion, we're more expensive than most of our competitors out there, but that's why. And, when you are representing, I'm talking about the interior designer, when not representing, but when you are doing the purchases or you're making the specifications, that really says a lot about the interior designer. When they show up with a product like that to their clients, it just speaks volume about the designer.
And we're educating them as well, because they probably didn't know that there was this special paper that made such a difference. And, sometimes you're just willing to pay for the best, Of course.
Well, when you stop and think about it, the museum paper I should say the paper that I use, which is a Canson photographic paper. It is a museum grade paper. Literally, it's what museums specify, for photographers to print on, because it protects against fading for up to 100 years. And that's very, very valuable, to a end user, especially if they're spending, nice amounts of money for the design package. You want to know that you're not going to have to replace that artwork in 5 to 7 years because of fading, right?
Absolutely.
So,
do you use museum glass as well?
We do. And I feel that's very, very important. If you're going to use a museum paper to get that crisp, super crisp image, you don't want the interference of glare that you get under standard glass, or, even an acrylic glass will do the same thing. That, when you use a museum glass, and honestly, museum glass is not that much more expensive to use than an acrylic, a nice acrylic, because there's different grades of acrylic glass too. Mm-hmm. But it's not that incredibly much more expensive to use a museum glass, but the outcome is tremendously different, because we'll have people come into the showroom and go touch the frame and the glass to see if there's actually glass in it.
People that are listening that are not familiar with that, if you go to your local frame shop, they will have museum glass, and there's generally regular trashy glass. Mm-hmm. Then you've got UV protected glass, and then you've got the museum glass. But the museum glass will always, it's for that very reason. It protects the art or the photograph even at a higher level, and it doesn't show the glare. But in many instances, you can't even tell that the glass is there. So the next time you go to frame something, really consider museum glass,
and protect the investment. Of course,
you'll appreciate the difference, and it does cost more, but it's worth it for sure. So, do you approach how do you do your framing, or are those very particularly chosen as well?
So, we do everything in house. Mm-hmm. We print, we do the framing, we do everything in house. Because I really wanted to approach our product towards a more muted 6 different colors, which is what you would typically find in a museum environment. But it also it tends to be more what you expect to see in a black and white photograph. Not that you can't use a gold leaf, frame with a black and white print. You certainly can do that, but that solid wood, again, just makes a huge different presentation for black and white, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So we offer natural cherry. It's a gray stained cherry is another option. Natural maple, white oak, walnut. And then, of course, we do our standard black, but it is it's still a solid wood, and it's stained black. And we use that particular frame for the black versus a lot of your standard frames where you don't see the wood grain in the black. Mm-hmm. We use that because so many times when you're using a solid black frame, it scars really, really easily. And it literally can scar moving it from one room to the next. If you bump it against something.
That is so true.
It's true. Mm-hmm.
So we don't even offer that, because it's just not the right way. In my opinion, that's not the right way to present your product to a client. When you use a wood stained molding, if you get a scar, you use a stain pen. Mm-hmm. You cover it up. No one's the wiser that you've scratched your frame that way. So I think it's just a better presentation for our client base, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What percentage of your work, Lannie, is black and white?
It's about 95%.
Yeah. When I looked on your site, I saw just a couple of colored images, but yeah, most of them look black and white.
Yeah. So sometimes there is an image that you're like, it has to be done in color. It just looks better in color than it does in black and white. And so those are the instances. And you may have also noticed that in those color prints or color images, the color is only at 50%. It's not a full 100% color image. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
Yeah.
I think it adds more drama to the image.
Well, we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I really want to jump into this quickly because when we were chatting, when we very first met you, the thing that we were most impressed with, and we were just talking about this at the seminar we were just at last week in Mexico about pivoting your business during COVID, and you made a big pivot that I think was just super, super smart during COVID because shipping is so crazy, and our supply chain is off the chain, as you, no pun intended. But you decided to make a big pivot with not framing and shipping just prints, correct?
So when we first started in the business, we did what most people thought was the appropriate way to run a business if you're doing what I'm doing. And that is we're selling you the framed image, not just the image. So, you would pick your frame and then you would pick your image. And we actually offered a lot more in frame styles than what we currently offer, just simply because the availability was much better. But we quickly realized, hey, we're getting in trouble because of freight issues, because we offer 7 standard sizes in loose prints that we did not offer before. But those were still our 7 standard sizes that we offered framed. So when you go to ship out a 40 by 60 print that's got museum glass in it, you have to crate it. You can't just put it in a box and hope it makes it okay. So it has to be crated. Freight just became totally unapproachable. And you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter whether it's a picture frame or it's a sofa. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we made the decision that, why don't we just offer loose prints, and we still will offer framing services. And those are our 6 standard colorways that we just talked about. But let's only offer our framed products in 2 sizes, 15 by 20 and 20 by 28, because those are still pretty easily manageable to freight out. And the freight isn't, exorbitantly expensive when you ship it out on FedEx. But if somebody still needs the 40 by 60, we just sell them the print now. And they can actually, frame the print in their local city or town and save all of that freight money and use that for framing. As soon as we did that, it was amazing, the turnaround, how much more business that we got because we started offering loose prints as well. So we kind of have to say thank you to COVID for that. Because it kind of forced us to look at things differently. And as we've had discussions in the past, is that, as a business owner, if you're not flexible and try to figure out a different way to do business during COVID, there's a chance you might not make it.
It's true.
You are so right.
We're appreciative.
You are so right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you sell to the trade only. So where can, if we have listeners that are not in the trade, how can they buy your images?
So again, like you said, we only sell to the trade, but we do have a website that is our retail prices, and that's iconesproducts.com. So it's just our name plus the word products altogether.com. And we don't really publish that. We know that interior designers, customers may want to try to go around and try to find a way to order it. And that's why we sell it at a retail price if that was to happen. But if we're dealing with the design trade, we will give them a code that gives them their discounts for trade pricing. And we really came up with that website not as a promotion to necessarily get the retail people out there, but it was to help be more order friendly to our design trade. So, gosh, if you're up at 2:00 in the morning because you can't sleep and you're going to work, you can place an order.
That was very smart. And for those interior designers or the public that's listening, you got to check out his website. And just so everybody knows, you spell Eikones, Eikones. So, and it's everything from mountains to oceans to trees to deserts to Europe, architecture, gardens. I mean, I love your breadth of work. And again, the quality is what really caught us as we were walking down the aisle. And
thank you.
Where we were really attracted to your work. So check out Eikones Studio on the website and on Instagram. And I think everybody will
You'll
be
see
really,
what we're
really
about.
impressed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Lannie, hold on for us because we end every podcast with a funny and a serious quote to get everybody going. So I got to do the funny quote because I remember it like it was yesterday. Are you ready?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Me
okay.
too.
Kids today finds out school is canceled via text. Me had to wake up at 6 a.m. and watch the bottom of the TV screen like the NBA draft. Right. And then if you came in at like, I was Montgomery High School. So like if I came in at the S's, I'm like, oh, I gotta keep waiting. Yeah.
And then I would say, why don't they just put the ones that are open? Because there's probably 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And so then we know we can, we know we're going to have
we can
a fun
go back
day.
to bed.
Yeah. So the serious quote, I picked this, Lannie, because we're talking about photography. So it says, a good photographer is one that communicates a fact, touches the heart, and leaves the viewer a changed person for having seen it. It is, in a word, effective. And that's by Irving Penn.
That's perfect.
That's a good one.
That is great.
It is so true. And when we are sourcing art for our clients, which we do a lot of, it's nice to look at photography, and particularly we love black and whites because after a while you need the mix, and you need that it just makes for a more...
And black and white photography looks beautiful in neutral spaces.
Oh, yes. And we're doing a lot of neutral spaces these days. So thank you, Lannie, again. And everybody, check out Eikones Studio. And where will we see you next? What's your next show? Will it be High Point in the spring?
Yep, we'll be there in April. Yeah, we'll be there in April.
Great.
Yep, we're there at Market Square in the Salon. So we're in the same location.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you to Sherwin-Williams again for sponsoring us.
And please take time, if you haven't, to rate, review, and share our podcast with your friends. We appreciate that very much.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Join Joanne and Kelly weekly for a lively conversation about trends, travels to industry events, current design projects, the good, the bad, and the ugly, do's and don'ts, product recommendations, and more. Be sure to follow the fun on Facebook. They're on Instagram at Kandrak Cole. And of course, you've got to visit them online at kandrak-cole.com for more information.